to the Flying Trout podcast. My name is Braden Evans, and this is episode 6. This week we're going to talk about kind of water access, how to get out there and find new spots, get away from the crowd a little bit, and, kind of find your own space on the water, because I think that's something we're all looking for, right? Um, Now more than ever, I think fly fishing is getting more and more popular, which is awesome. But unfortunately, that leads to space on the water being a little bit more limited. There's more people on the water than ever. Access can sometimes be hard, and sometimes that can make fly fishing a little bit more challenging. But I think there's still a lot of things that we can do to find that access and find our own space on the water. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So we'll get into that a little bit. The article that we're going to read this week is called "Walk a Little Further." I posted it, last year. Looks like March, sometime like that. But I mean, first, you might have noticed we missed a week. Long story short, I broke my phone, and my phone's what I record on. There were two kids at a lake that were swimming around with their kayaks, and they started going under, and I was pretty close because my wife and I were paddleboarding. Jumped in the water to help them out, and kind of forgot that my phone screen, or I guess the back of my phone, was cracked, and so a bunch of water got in there and completely fried it. So had to get a new phone, but we got that. You might also notice that my eye is completely messed up. If you're watching the video, I apologize. Audio might be better this week. I had to get 7 stitches in my face. I started playing rugby again and just went head to head with another guy. It happens. It's okay. Didn't hurt or anything, but I did get some pretty cool pictures of my skull. So last week was a little bit of a weird one, so we skipped last week. So my apologies if you were looking out for that. But we're here. We're back. Episode 7. And this is a topic I'm really excited to talk about, because I think access is something a lot of people complain about in both the hunting and the fishing world. But I think this is kind of a call to action on, number one, what you can do from like an advocacy standpoint, but then number 2, what you can do just for yourself, because I think we can sometimes make excuses a little bit. So we'll talk about that more here in just a minute. But first, this is the article. It's called "Walk a Little Farther." I live in Colorado. I'm very fortunate to live within a 20-minute drive of Class 1 trout streams and an hour and a half from gold medal water that people travel from all over the world to fish. Sometimes I take that for granted. I start to think that everyone has the same advantages as me, that they can pick up a fly rod at any time and escape to the tall pines and rocky landscape of the mountains I call home. I know that's not true, but it's still easy to forget how easy I have it. I often talk with friends who have the same frustrations as all of us who live this close to pristine landscapes and wild trout streams. One of the hardest things we deal with is people. Fly fishing is growing, and that is awesome. I love seeing new anglers hitting the water and trying out the sport that I love. I hope they catch fish, and I hope they find all the great things about fly fishing that I cherish so deeply. Still, it is frustrating to pull up to your favorite section of stream and find that somebody is already stomping through it, casting in all the wrong places and spooking every fish within a quarter mile. However, I was reminded last week that even on a stream you find yourself fishing often, you can find new water and new experiences in the most unlikely of places. I have a stream that I call my home water. I fish it often because it's only 20 minutes from my front door, and it holds a healthy population of wild rainbows and browns. If you're lucky, you can even find the occasional cutbow or the elusive greenback cutthroat. It's a fun, technical stream that features textbook pocket water and epic scenery as the water cuts through a deep canyon bordered by high mountainous walls of rock. You can often catch glimpses of mountain goats walking on cliffs, and the sound of elk bugling will occasionally cascade through the landscape. It is a special place and a stream that I hold close to my heart. The problem? Other people are certainly starting to figure out how special this often overlooked stream is. Over the past few years, I've seen more people coming out and fishing these waters, and more houses being built on its banks. It's frustrating because this used to be the kind of stream you could go a whole day without seeing another soul, even during peak season. I was heading to the stream not long ago when I pulled up to one of my favorite spots. Here, the river pulls away from the road, and you can find some nice pockets that I've caught 18-inch brown trout out of pretty frequently. When I looked at the stream, I saw two people fishing my water. I turned the car around and decided to try something new. I had fished this river from the start of the canyon up to the headwaters, and at this point knew it like the back of my hand. However, there are a couple sections that are privately owned, so I have not had the chance to get on that portion and try it out. Though these are often the most fishy looking sections of river, of course. One of these sections I had always thought was private turned out not to be. When I pulled county property lines, I learned that the river was actually part of a Forest Service land but is bordered by two sections of private land. What resulted was about a mile stream between two properties, completely disconnected from the road. There was only one issue. The section was a 2-mile walk up and over a pretty large hump of rocky terrain, and who knew what the fishing was like? I had been holding off hitting this section until the weather warmed up and peak season had come. That way I could give it the best chance for success. But given that my plans had been thwarted for the day, I figured what the hell. Parked the car at the closest pull off. The ascent to the top of the hump was only about 50 yards. But then I could look down at the decent descent ahead of me. It was steep, but not undoable. Maybe something my wife would not have approved of, but I have a tendency to do stupid things chasing trout in remote locations. I found a game trail descending the mountain and began to follow it. I took each step carefully, more for the sake of my rod than any concern for my own well-being. Each step had to be intentional, and I was thankful for the metal studs in my wading boots. There are a few spots where I start to think, how in the world will I make it back out? But I figured that whatever animal had made this trail make it back and forth, I could probably find a way, right? Eventually, I found my way to the bottom, and I looked around to take stock of the hidden stream. Had all that effort been worth it? In short, the answer was yes. I was greeted with a mesmerizing section of stream. A cascading waterfall crashed into a deep pool that created a beautiful pocket of slow water. I could almost imagine all the trout feeding on nymphs knocked loose from those rocks just behind the waterfall. That pool narrowed to a section of fast-moving pocket water before hitting a bend in the river that curved against a huge cliff wall, creating another deep section under the cliff. That cliff created a shaded zone where the trout could hide from the keen eyes of raptors soaring overhead. I only had to look for a moment before I saw them. There were trout, many of them, tucked next to the cliff under a shelf of ice. I watched as they moved from behind boulders in the stream, jetting out to eat whatever bugs were floating by. I smiled and walked to the bank as sneakily as I could before I began to cast. My fly landed exactly where I wanted, and I watched as it drifted by at least 10 fish, who all could not have cared less about what I tied on. I cast a few more times with the same fly, but again, I watched as it drifted by uninterested eyes. I clipped my tippet and selected another fly, a larger nymph. Maybe that would help them see it? Again, I cast my line and waited as more fish started to group in the same area. Still, the fly went by, completely ignored by the fish who I could see were actively eating something. I thought for a moment. These fish were keyed in on something. I looked in the stream to see what I could find. Each time a fish jetted out to the fast-moving water, I tried to see what they were eating. Was it large? Was it small? Was it dark? The longer I looked, the more I became convinced that they were feeding on small midges drifting by. It was early March, so that would make sense with the time of year. I couldn't see anything drifting in the current, though hard to see if I looked hard enough. I can typically tell if stoneflies or mayfly nymphs are drifting in a stream. I decided to tie on the smallest midge I had, a size 22 zebra midge. I cast my line out again. It landed next to the shelf of ice, and the fish had been hiding under. I felt as the fly dropped in the water column and ticked to the bottom of the stream. It drifted by the first fish, unnoticed. The second went out to strike but missed it. It drifted by others to the same effect. Still, at least they acknowledged this fly. I was about to reset and cast again when I felt my line go tight and my rod tip dip hard. Something had eaten my fly. I sat the hook and the fight was on. I could already tell the fish was larger than the normal fish I catch in this river. Really, the average size of a fish is anywhere around 12 inches in this stream, and this fish was much larger than that. It pulled my rod tip down as it tried to swim away, but I pulled against it, trying to keep it from going downstream. The fish started to tire, and I was able to pull it closer, close enough to catch my first glimpse of the fish. It was big. I estimated this fish to be a 24-inch brown trout. My heart raced. This would take the cake for my largest fish caught so far and would completely trump my best from this river at 18 inches. My heart raced and I could feel my hands begin to sweat. The fish was tired. I had won. Now I only had to net the behemoth. Then I realized the pickle I was in. I was standing on an ice shelf overhanging the river. The fish was in the middle of the stream where the ice thinned and would certainly not support my weight. I tried to think quickly. How could I get him close to the net? I didn't think quickly enough. The fish found its energy and darted under my feet, under the ice. I tried to pull it out, but the fish was too strong and my rod was at a bad angle. My line went slack as the fish finally managed to wiggle the hook out of its mouth. I sat stunned next to the river for more than a little while. How could I not have thought of that? I always tell people to think about how they'll land a fish if they were to hook into one. Doing so is allowing you to net the fish quickly and get it back in the water. It's more humane and less stressful on the fish. Do what I say, not what I do. I chuckled at myself and stood back up. I thought through the situation and found a better place to stand where I could actually be able to net a fish if I hooked another. I cast to the same spot, but I knew the fish were spooked. You can't fight a fish that big for that long and not scare everything in that pond. Still, I held on to hope and fished that pool for an hour. Again, I broke my own rules. I tell people 5 casts. 5 casts is all you get in a certain spot. If you haven't gotten one or taken a bite, move on and change your flies. Do as I say, not as I do. I fished there the rest of the day with the same fly in the same spot, and I never got so much as a nibble. I turned to begin the trek back up the mountain. The path was steep, and the sting of losing such a fish hung with me as I climbed. Sweat dripped from my head and down my back. My lungs burned as I hoofed it through the terrain. Finally, I reached the top and got back to my car. As I caught my breath, I thought back through the day. It would be easy to beat myself up, to think myself silly for losing that fish, and then to think myself dumb for fishing the same pool for so long. But at least I had the chance. I tried a new section and was rewarded with the fight of a lifetime. And I had seen no one, not another soul, the whole morning. That had to count for something. Besides, now I knew where that fish was, and I knew I'd be back. I stripped off my waders and boots, took a long drink of water, and loaded into the car for the drive back home. My thoughts were filled with large trout and sketchy hikes. My heart was full. I had found a new section of stream, maybe my favorite on my home water, and I had been rewarded with an opportunity I didn't think existed on that river. And all it took was a little more effort and the initiative to try something new and walk a little farther. All right, so that's this week's article, and I gotta tell you, it's kind of hard reliving that day. It's definitely still the biggest fish I've hooked into, and still haven't found it. But what I did find that day was a new section of stream. And I think sometimes that's even more valuable. I've gone back and fished that section now more recently, and it's become one of my favorite. It's a hard walk in. Nobody does it, but when you get there, I have yet to have a bad day. And sometimes that's the name of the game, is finding those places where people aren't fishing as much. You know, I think the trout don't necessarily know where we get into the water, but I do think they eventually learn how many times a hook goes into their mouth. And I think they start to go to places where that happens less frequently. And so I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind, is if the access is easy, that might be a little bit telling of the spot. So there's a few things I want to talk about with this article. And I think the first one is just the frustration of crowded water. You know, I think it's something that all of us who live next to great water deal with, and I think it's becoming more of a thing over time as fly fishing continues to grow, which is awesome. Um, but it's just a fact of the matter is that fishing is going to be more crowded, and more people are hitting the streams, and I think more and more people aren't learning the right ways to hit the stream. Right, like I've been high hold. I can't even tell you how many times where people come, even 10 yards right in front of me. And I'm just like, what is happening right now? And so I think that's the first thing you got to deal with is, you got to realize that that's going to happen. And you got to try to find places where that's not going to happen. But then you also got to think that these people, we're all trying to do the same hobby. And hopefully we can get along out there. So I think if you're dealing with that, try to be the better person and try to be the person that's going to, be a good steward of the sport. I think don't high hole people. In most cases, I would say I'm always moving upstream, and that's how pretty much all of us should be fishing at least. And so, I mean, if you see somebody fishing, don't go even, I would say even 50 yards in front of them. I would say give them, a half mile before you get in the water, and then you guys can both fish and not influence each other's fishing at all and everything. And I think that's just a much better way to do it. But I think that's a key frustration that a lot of people are having is getting cut off like that. And so I think we all just need to be cognizant of that and know that we need to be better stewards, and we need to look after our sports so people don't get frustrated and turn away. And I mean, the other thing is, at least in my case, I'm fishing all public water, right? And so I truly have no right or no more right than anybody else to be on the stream. And so I think we also got to be a little bit more patient with each other too. I have a few runs that I definitely call my run, and they're definitely not. Anybody can fish them because they are public water, but there are places that hold special spots in my heart. But I think that just comes down to all of us, and we all got to work together and be sure that this resource stays as valuable as it truly is. So don't get too frustrated, and try to be the kind of person that you want to see on the stream. So I also think with that, you have to have a plan B, right? You have to have a plan B because there are so many people on the water. And so I've done it so many times. I, get in my truck in the morning and I'm driving to the river and I'm thinking, man, I'm going to fish this spot. And then I get there and there's somebody in that spot and it's like, well, crap. And then my whole day is ruined. Like I'm in a bad mood and I don't fish as well and all these things. And it's like, man, if we can all just be like, hey, I want to fish this spot. This is my plan B. This is my plan C. And you go through all of those. I think it just makes, number one, your day will be a lot less frustrating. You'll get a lot much better fishing in. And then sometimes, like in this story, man, I had no idea that I could pull off to this spot. And ended up just finding out that, it's situated right between two private sections, but you could get in there on some public access. It's just, you gotta work for it. And it's one of my favorite spots now. I go down back there and fish it all the time, and I've had great success on it. And so I think you also just got to remember that some of the best days on the water will be found in your plan B. It's not going to be on the piece of water that you fished every single time. It's going to be found in that plan B, right? So I think something that we all should try to do, and I kind of talked about it in this article, but this river that I'm talking about, I've fished from now, especially I've fished from, where it becomes quality waters. I fished from that starting point all the way up to the headwaters. And I think if you haven't done that on your home river, you really should. You're not going to be able to do it on every river in the world, but on the couple of rivers that you call home, I think it's a huge resource that you can do. And it'll just make you, know that whole stream. You're going to learn so much if you go through and do that. And it's a huge time investment. But the way that I did it, what I did is I set pings on my map. And so, I've got my phone app, and then I've just got Google Maps on there. And you can actually drop a pin wherever you start fishing and stop fishing for a day, and so you can track it that way. The other resource has been huge for me is the Garmin app on my phone. I do all my whenever I fish, I record it as a fishing exercise, and you can actually log your catches and everything. But I've loved that because it also records the GPS locations of where you're going, and so I'll start wherever it is, and then I'll end it where I end fishing. And I'm always working upstream. And what that's been able to do is if I'm, getting in nice fish and everything, I can backtrack and be like, okay, I stopped fishing here. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to, start, maybe I'll start 100 yards back from that so I can fish that section again. But then I just, keep on working that up, and you can see that over time. And then that way you can also see how many fish you caught in each section and kind of identify what are the sections that you want to come back to more frequently. But I think that all just comes down to note taking, and it also just comes out to exploring a little bit. If you want to catch fish consistently in your home water, I think you've got to know that stream. And to do that, you've got to explore the whole thing. There's no other way around it. It's going to make you know the stream so much better. And the amount of people that actually do it, it's not a lot, right? Most people are hitting that easy access. They're going straight to that, and that's fine. But man, if you can get into those harder access areas, I promise you're going to have more luck. That's where all of my best fishing has been. So, and that kind of leads us into the next point, but just risk versus reward, right? Like, a lot of people do. They want to have easy fishing, and that's fine. I've got no problem with that if that's who you are. Or, I'm probably going to be there one day when I'm like 70 or 80 and my hips are all shut and my knees are all weak and everything. I get it, and not everybody's going to be able to do that. But if you are able to, I think you should absolutely work for your fishing. I think fish hard and fish well and get after it. Some of my best days have just been, man, I trekked through like a mile, 2 mile, 3 mile hike and found just amazing sections of water. And the longer you have to hike, typically, the more secluded that river section is going to be. Less people are influencing those trout, and so they're going to take things that are more natural. You're not going to have to deal with all this angling pressure stuff because those fish see less people. And I think that's just made fishing way more fun for me. Number one, because I'm just a hoodlum and I just want to go out into the woods and, go find sticks and things so that is definitely part of why I love it. But it's also just made the fishing so much more memorable. And so many people are like, man, how are you catching like this many fish on this river stream or whatever? And it's like, well, how far away from your car did you walk? I think it's huge for people, and I think it's just something that we don't talk enough about. So I think if you're, doing sketchy, for lack of a better word, don't do anything unsafe, obviously. But if you're, getting into, some pretty thick stuff and you're getting back there and doing this, I think you're going to find some untouched water, and I think you're going to have a really good time doing it. So that's my challenge for you, I guess, is just fish hard, get over that next hill or go to that next access and find those places where the river really pulls away from the road, and get in there and have a great time. You're going to have a lot of success, and you're going to have a lot of fun and a lot of great stories to tell. I think, something we also got to talk a little bit about, and this is kind of like a sub point in all of this, but one I do want to talk a little bit about is just thinking about, where your body position is on the river. In this story, I didn't think about it enough, and it actually resulted in me losing what would have been my probably best fish to date. It happens, but still stings a little bit because I haven't been able to get into anything that big this year yet. Hopefully the fall will change that a little bit, but most of what I've been fishing is like small stream, that sort of stuff. But this fish, man, and I'll fully admit that there might be some, heat of the moment, my eyes seeing the fish thinking it's bigger than it is, but I can tell you it was much bigger than most of the fish that I catch on this stream. And it just makes it hurt more. And the reason was totally my fault. I was standing on an ice shelf. I didn't think about, where that fish was going to move or fight to. And so I actually hooked into it. It was down below me. And so that fish's natural place to go was just right underneath the ice shelf, right underneath my feet. And there was no way that I could get it out with where I was at. And so something to think about just a little bit when on the stream is, where are you going to hook the fish? And then where are you going to catch the fish? Where are you going to actually net it? And just make that easy for yourself. Otherwise, things like this happen. It happens to all of us, but be sure you're thinking about that on there. So, but I think that's, a huge, I think something we can all learn from the story, right, is number one, having a plan B, exploring the water and knowing that river can really help you find these unique experiences. And then, man, when you work that hard to get into that new experience, it's kind of on you to make sure that it goes the way that you want it to go. There are so many mistakes that you can have and make out there, and there's a lot of prep work and thought that you have to put in order to make those things go well. So if you're gonna commit to hiking in further, if you're gonna commit to working harder for your fishing, you also have to be more intentional about it, right? Like, man, if you hike 3 miles into a spot up and over like some pretty rough country and you get there and realize you left your fly box at home, I mean, that's not a good feeling and you're not going to have a good day. And so I think if this is a pursuit that you want to truly get into at this level, if you don't, that's fine, right? Keep hitting the easy accesses and keep, catching good fish, but not quite having that same level of experience. That's totally fine. If that's where you want to be, that's totally fine. I take nothing away from that. That is a great experience to have. But I do think that if you can work harder, if you can get up and over that next ridge, if you can find that way around that next bend, and if you can find these accesses, you're going to have just crazy experiences. You're going to see bigger fish. You're going to see more fish. You're going to see crazy wild country. You're going to see elk. You're going to see sheep. You're going to see all these crazy, awesome things. But if you commit to that, you need to be intentional, right? And unfortunately, in this story, I wasn't as intentional as I should have been. So do as I say, not as I do. And think about, when you're in that spot, how are you going to make the most of it? And I think for me, that's really a mentality that I've taken from hunting. In hunting, you have such limited opportunities for, these amazing experiences. You have a number of days, you have a weekend, you have a month maybe. And, depending on how much you're able to hunt during that time, you have such a limited time to make the most of it. And so, I mean, hunters are extremely intentional with what they do. And I think that's something that us as fly anglers can just learn a ton from is, man, if I'm going to put this much effort in, how do I make the most of it? All right, so make the most of your time out there. Think through how you're going to hook fish, what you're going to take with you. Be sure you have all the right gear. Be sure you're ready so that when you meet the moment, you can meet it in the terms that you want to meet it. Okay, so fish with intensity and fish with intentionality. Okay, that's what I want you to focus on. And if you can do that, I think you're going to find more solitude, more connection, and you're going to have just these awesome experiences. So if you want to commit to it, I totally think it's worth it. So, all right, that's kind of our discussion of this week's article. I do have a couple of kind of listener questions and that sort of thing that will kind of move along on this topic. I think are good for you. So first one is, how do you find those off-beaten paths or water sections? And that is a huge thing, right? I think it's something we all kind of struggle with, and it's almost like there's so much that you could do. And so what are you actually going to do? And we got to break that down and have resources to be able to think about it a little bit. And there's a few things that I use. Number one, I'm a huge nerd of maps. Okay, I'm a huge map nerd. It's one of the things that I studied in college, and so I use GIS maps. And so I'll go online, I'll log into like county GIS maps and everything, and I'll clickety clack around on those. I can pull property lines, I can pull public versus private, I can pull all that stuff, and just kind of read and look at it. And then also I just get lost in maps. I love maps so much. So first is GIS maps. If you're not a huge map nerd and you need a little bit filtering and that sort of stuff, there's a few apps that are really great. Onyx is just a great resource. They're kind of getting all these different things. But they are a huge resource that you can pull public and private information from. And so if you're going to be hiking into these areas, it's really good information to know. Trout Routes is an amazing resource that'll give you, fly shops, stream gauges. It's going to give you all of this great information. And it's just a great way to see, where you want to fish or new water to fish, new sections. And so if you don't have one of those, if you're going to pick any of them, I would definitely go Trout Routes personally. I think it's kind of the best of all. So check that out. And then also just like Google Maps. Like Google Maps is a great resource I think we kind of overlook. But I mean, you have the entire world at your fingertips, literally on your phone. And so use Google Maps a little bit and just look around, definitely vet if it's public or private and that sort of thing. But just look around. I mean, even blue lining a little bit on Google Maps can be fun, and just finding a stream that you don't even know what's there, and maybe you pull up and it's dry or whatever. But like sometimes those little streams can turn into like the best water you've ever fished. So just, have a little bit of fun and dive into those. I think as you start, if you're just starting on that journey, the best thing to look for is there's a lot of streams, especially in like the West, where I mean, I say just like the West. I don't know about the East. I've never fished it, but there's a lot of places where the road runs right next to the river, and I think if you look along those roads and you look for where that river pulls away for, a half mile, a quarter mile, or a full mile, where that river bends away, man, if you can find those spots that are public, those are going to be the ticket. Okay. Those are my favorite spots. Those are the ones I catch the most fish at. And so I would definitely look for those bends away from the road. And that's going to be a great starting point for you as you kind of start to find that water away from everybody else. Second question is it really worth it to hike that far for new water? And I'm just going to say 100% yes. Not always for the reason you expect. Sometimes you might get skunked at a new spot. Sometimes you're not going to catch the quality or quantity of fish that you want. But you are going to have some pretty amazing experiences. You're going to see things that most people don't see. You're going to step on land that people haven't stepped on in a long time, or if ever. And I think the fishing is just a good bonus for it. So if you've ever tried it, 100%, just try hiking out there a little farther, and getting after it, and you're going to find some really, really cool stuff back there. So, all right, that is this week's episode of the Flying Trout Podcast. This is episode 7, and I hope you liked it. This is something I like talking about, and I love, doing. I love being out in a little bit further away from everything and being out there where people don't fish as much, and finding new trailheads and that sort of thing. And I think if you're like me, you'll enjoy that a ton. And I think it's something I'd like to talk a little bit more about later in the future too. So if you enjoyed this one, let us know, and reach out, drop a comment, drop a line. I love talking to you guys. I mean, the response to the water temperature one was really great, and there was a really great discussion going on one of the Facebook groups I'm in when I posted that one. And that was one of the most rewarding things I've experienced from this whole podcast thing so far. So if you want to talk about this one too, I'd love to keep having those conversations, and just reach out. And I guess we'll see you next week. All right. Till then, fish well, friends. We'll see you out there.